Okay, so what we're going to do is really go through a very brief 5-minute overview. And I know some of you have seen this already, but I think it's important to make sure everybody's kind of up to speed on the process and where we are. As I mentioned, we're going to be recording the meeting. During this initial piece, we'd like everybody to just kind of stay on mute. And then really the 3/4 of this meeting is a discussion and a conversation. So there'll be plenty of time for everybody to jump in and share their thoughts. If you have feedback or questions during the initial portion or during any time during the meeting, go ahead and just put it in the chat. If there's something else larger that comes up, my email address is right there if you'd like to send something over. Okay. So really to put this in the overall context of what we're doing. So the West Ward in Easton is one of 11 grantees in the 2020 round of Choice Neighborhood Planning Grants, one of 11 in the country. And what that really entails is for us to spend the next, well, really it's a 2-year-long process overall, and we're about a year in, but we're really looking to develop a plan that looks at these 3 core elements of choice, which is people, housing, and neighborhoods. And so this differs a little bit from previous HUD programs, which have had more of a direct housing focus. In the case of Choice Neighborhoods, we will be looking at how do we improve housing for low income and moderate income residents all the way up the food chain to market rate. But we're also looking at how do we improve the neighborhood as a whole. What physical improvements can help to connect people, things like improving open spaces, businesses is really part of this discussion here today. And then the cherry on top is really the people element of the plan, which are the supportive services and the quality of life projects and programs that can help to really lead people to success and to new opportunities. So the Choice Neighborhood Planning area, as we've defined it, is essentially the West Ward. So everything from 6th Street on the east all the way to 15th Street on the west, going north to Bushkill Creek and south to the Lehigh River. So this is really an asset-based approach. So we've really been trying to think about strategies and how we can build upon the great things that are already in the community, like Paxenosa Elementary School and Cottingham Stadium and the Easton Area Community Center, while addressing the challenges that we know are impacting local residents. So the neighborhood as a whole has just under 10,000 residents, and it's about a square mile. And I think we all know it's a pretty densely packed place. It's pretty walkable, although it is very hilly. There's some certain kind of inherent challenges that come with a more urban environment like this. You don't have like the large parks. We generally don't have a lot of room for new housing. I think there's really, we need to take an approach where we're looking at smaller scale incremental development and rehab along with some bigger ideas. But that's something that we'll talk about as a group going forward. So as I mentioned, we have a 2-year-long process overall, and we're kind of smack dab in the middle today. So we spent much of last year listening and learning, envisioning for the future, developing kind of a framework for how we want to move forward with this plan. So now we're in the working groups section of the process. So we're developing the strategies, the programs and projects, and we're creating community connections through meetings like this, where we have different residents and stakeholders and partners kind of all at the table working together. Where we go from here in the next 5 or so months, we'll be detailing out the people, housing, and neighborhood elements. And our draft plan is due to HUD. I believe it's June or July of this upcoming year, with the final plan due in November. So we have about 5 months to really draft everything up and about 6 months to refine it afterwards. We have an ultimate goal of using this plan to apply for what's called a Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant, which could be anywhere between $30 and $50 million, or potentially even more, to really rebuild the housing, implement people projects, improve the physical structure of the neighborhood. So that's really our ultimate goal, but we want this plan to be really detailed out and thought out enough that it can be implemented without the big kind of HUD funding at the end of the rainbow. So that's the approach that we're taking overall. So within the larger West Ward, we have three housing authority properties. And for the grant itself, we had to identify one of those as our quote unquote target housing site. So for the sake of the planning grant, our target housing is the North Union Street Apartments, which you can see here in the photo. So this property is very close to downtown Easton. It's just off of Northampton. It was built in 1963. There's 57 apartments on a little over 3 acres. About 139 residents live there today. So we have really a requirement and a goal to do a 1-for-1 replacement of any very low income housing that we redevelop as part of this process. So what that means is the 57 units that are here today, there will be 57 units of housing for these families in the future. And if we expand and really include all 3 of the housing authority properties, then we'll be looking for the 1-for-1 replacement. But one of the goals of Choice Neighborhoods is not just rebuilding public housing in the same place with the same kind of features. It's really creating a mixed income environment. So you have people kind of living side by side with different income ranges, different family styles, but it's very well kind of interspersed. So you can't tell where what the income of one tenant is versus another. It's all very high quality new housing. So that's North Union Street. And then our 2 other housing authority properties, we have the Bushkill House, which is just north of the North Union Street property. And that's a senior and disabled site. So it has about 48 units of housing within a kind of a mid-rise building. And you can see the photo there of the Bushkill House. You could also see the lawn out in front of the Bushkill House, which we've started to look at as a potential opportunity site for additional affordable housing. And then we have the Elm Street Apartments. And I think we have at least one resident here from Elm Street. And that's 55 units of family housing at the south end of the neighborhood. And you can see just by the photo, there's a lot of challenges there from a physical point of view and the topography and how it makes it difficult for residents to get around that site. So if you can picture yourself parking in that parking lot and then having to walk all the way down to your unit, that can be a challenge, especially in the wintertime. So we're really taking a comprehensive look at how we can reinvest in all 3 of those properties while also addressing the larger scale affordable housing and business issues of the West Ward. So we have 5 different working groups that have been meeting. This is the 3rd group of our set, housing and business, but we have equity and inclusion, community health and safety, transportation and open space, art, history, and culture. And there's really there's a lot of overlap between these different elements. So it's up to us to kind of share the ideas across the different working groups and kind of make sure that they're organized and synchronized. So a lot of what we're doing is built off of larger community feedback that we've had through the summer and fall. We had a series of community meetings in the neighborhood when we could still meet outside and meet in person. So we had meetings at Paxinosa. We had smaller meetings on all of the housing authority properties where we've been talking to residents about some of the things that they want to see. So that's really the basis for the discussion here today. And we also conducted what's called a needs assessment survey of the public housing residents of our community. So we had about 70% of the housing authority residents complete the survey over a several month period. And I have to give a shout out to our community ambassadors who really did a great job of kind of getting the word out. We did door knocking, we did smaller events like the one in the photo, but we and HUD think it's very important to collect the data as a baseline for recommendations that go forward in a plan. All right, so enough talking. Now I'm going to kind of get into more of the interactive portion of the meeting, which I think is what we all are really here for. So give me just a second and I'll get that opened up. All right. So some of you who have been on a couple of our previous working groups, this may look familiar. So this is our Mural Board, which is really an online bulletin board where we can share information and put sticky notes and kind of move things around in more of an interactive setting. So you can see the 5 working groups here. This is our vision mind map, which was created over the summer during some of our community meetings. That's our starting point for today. Over on the right side, we have some of our initial bubble diagrams of what we're thinking about for both the North Union site, the Bushkill House site, and then on down to Elm Street. So we've presented this to our steering committee. We've presented it to the local residents on the property, and we're starting to refine these a bit. But I just wanted to have them here as reference so we can get into this discussion as well if people want to focus on one or more particular sites. And then down here, we have some of the results of our resident survey. So I don't want to go through all the data points, but some that were related, most specifically to this topic, that the residents feel that the current apartments are too small and they don't really fit modern families. So that's something that we're really hoping to improve. That the kitchens, bathrooms, and closets are the areas that really need the most improvement overall. Residents indicated that the businesses that they want to see in the neighborhood, really a grocery, and we've heard that obviously early and often, but things like laundromat, health clinic, and a police station are things that were brought up during the survey. And then on-site amenities, residents are really looking for on-site laundry and fitness, gym space, the health clinic again, a cafe or a game room. And those are some indoor spaces that people want to see. And then in terms of a couple of the other data points, so transportation is a big issue with our housing authority residents. About half of them drive and about half of them don't. So people are definitely reliant on getting around on foot, neighbors helping them get places, riding the bus, etc. So I think that kind of speaks to some of the challenges of the neighborhood overall from locations of businesses close to where people actually live and what some of the challenges are there. So now I'm going to kind of take us through the mind map, and I'm going to kind of pause at each of these areas and kind of open it up for discussion. But this is a lot of the feedback that we've collected to date around housing and business. And we shared this prior to the meeting, so you might have had a chance to take a look at it. But I think the kind of starting at the top left, the key word for folks is affordable housing. I think people understand that the market for housing is getting stronger within the city, and that there's challenges related to that, especially in terms of potential displacement. So how do we create additional units of affordable housing? People talked about supply and demand, and I think that's where it really gets to that point of varying cost points. We need to make sure that affordable stock is available for those who need it, and that there's money set aside for new affordable housing and workforce programs through local partnerships. And I know Amy and probably several of the other participants here are currently part of an affordable housing task force for the city as a whole. So there's definitely overlap in what we're doing in the West Ward focus with some of the bigger policies that are coming out of the city of Easton. And I think that people are really also focused on how do we help existing homeowners. So grants for home improvements, but also grants for small businesses and potentially even tenants to be able to stay in their homes, but that we need more housing in general. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more here to share, but I know everybody's probably itching to kind of weigh in, at least on this, some of what they've heard so far. So feel free to come off mute, jump into discussion, or if you have something you'd want to put in the chat, you can do that as well. So who would like to get us started?
I'll go first.
All right.
So when I first, came to the Easton area, I was on Section 8, and I was able to utilize that to sustain me for quite a few years. And then as I gained skills and got promotions, I was no longer qualified for that, which was great. So it worked intentionally for what it needed to. But as I was renting and looking to get into home ownership, I felt like there was a bubble and it was about to burst, and I would no longer be able to get into a home. And I feel that a lot of people feel that way now. Like, I feel that if I hadn't purchased my home at the time that I did, and, it was a seller's market, so I did overpay. However, that's neither here nor there. I just feel that the opportunity is lost for a lot of people who are potentially looking for home ownership. I know I have an elderly member in my family, and the apartment that she lives in is subpar. Her landlord is not the greatest at updating and doing the things that he needs to do. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have a vehicle, so transportation to clinics and everything, it's difficult for her. So yes, all those key points are, I think, very needed to be addressed, especially for elderly who are living not maybe in those housing buildings, but in their private owned apartments, and they're kind of being taken advantage of. Like, she wants to move and there's nothing on the market that she can afford because she's on a fixed income. Yeah. So I think that would be a good, good route to look when we're looking to help people, probably purchasing a home. I purchased my home, and, a month after, my roof was leaking. I have a leaking roof. I can't fix it. I've looked for funding. It's not available. I haven't lived in the house long enough, some people say. So if there's opportunities for other people in my position and in the position of people I've seen around me, it would be really great.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. That's fantastic, and congrats on buying your home. That's an amazing step.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you, with your background coming from New York, you can probably speak to how quickly neighborhoods can change in terms of people getting priced out. So I'm just curious about, did you see that happen in your previous neighborhood? And is that part of the reason why you ended up in Easton?
Yes. So essentially what was happening was, unfortunately, gentrification. So at the time that I left, it's over a decade ago now. And at the time that I left, everyone from Manhattan was looking to come into Brooklyn for lower rents. And so that pushed people out. And at a point, we had like a mass exodus from Brooklyn, and a lot of people moved to Atlanta. So there's a great many people that left New York City because Atlanta was offering affordable home housing. My mother came and purchased a home here. And that's how I eventually came to Easton, because she said, listen, PA is right. It's just right there. It's one state away. It's less than 2 hours to New York. And the housing market is so great. And what's happening in New York is you're never going to be able to buy at this point. That was about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Not a problem.
Okay. Would anyone else like to share? Amy, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to comment on the Cities Redevelopment Authority program. I am lucky to be a recipient of one of their initial homes, and it was income qualifying. So I had to make below 80% of median income. And Like Nadia, I share that if I hadn't bought, I don't know where I would be now, because I would not be able to sustain a rent in the city right now. So I definitely felt that squeeze. Granted, that was still 11 years ago, but I still felt it then. I'm also super sympathetic to you, Nadia, where you're kind of stuck in this middle place where you probably don't qualify for the below median income incentive things to fix your house, but you don't make enough to just be able to write a check. And I feel like that's another piece to home ownership, and that we need to talk about for people that make, between 80 to 100% of median income, where, they're struggling as is the national conversation. And how do we help folks like that and make things available to them? And also, as we're talking about affordable housing too, how do we make those, almost look at a bigger qualifying bracket? Because as Nadia said, people are getting priced out, and that opportunity is going away. And, then rents become much more expensive than owning a home itself.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Amy. I see Andrea has her hand up.
Yes, so thanks, Amy, and thanks, Nadia, for sharing your experience. I strongly agree with what you're saying, and it's really great to see those programs at work with you guys. I think that it's really great, and I also agree with the need to expand the impact of these programs and to expand the number of people that could access these programs. What Nadia was saying about what happened in New York, I visited a new development. Well, this was like 4 years ago in New York City. I visited a new development called Essex Crossing, and exactly right at that neighborhood in New York, they had to take over like a lot of they had to cover a really big property, and everybody around it was afraid that it was going to cause displacement. But this new development was creating home ownership opportunities in addition to like whatever number of apartments that were created. And what they did is that the current residents from within 5 blocks of the site were the ones that got dibs on the home ownership opportunities. So I think that I don't know how we could create a strategy like that. I don't know if the law and the programs that rule everything related housing in Pennsylvania would allow that kind of a community agreement. But I think that whatever effort comes out of it, it really has to be targeted. And really, I think that we should give preference to existing residents from the immediate area before those homeownership opportunities go to other people with a higher income or with higher education, and that would effectively be gentrification, right? So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that idea. Okay, anyone else want to jump in, or else I'm going to move us on to some of the other points here.
Hi.
Hi, Nearest, go ahead.
I thought about what the first speaker said. I don't remember her name. I'm so sorry. I moved here years ago from Newark, but I originate from New York City, Bushwick housing projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I know about living in that situation and trying to get out, like she said. And it just looks like you're never going to get out. But then I had opportunities and moved out to PA. I didn't want to be out here, but it was better for me. So it's like something is missing within that, because I agree with what everybody said.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. Because my son just bought a home and he didn't have it for like 2 months and the whole oil tank went. So like no heat.
Yep.
It's been 8 degrees. Like there's no funding for that. Like they said, you can't raise tax.
Yeah, I hear you. Definitely. So that gets to like the grants for homeowners to make those types of repairs on their properties. So
Right.
thank you for that.
Thank
Just kind of shifting over. So people have noted that we obviously really need to help and support low income families, build equity and help stabilize the neighborhood, consider innovative ways and working with landlords. That's obviously always a big challenge, especially when you have landlords that don't currently live in the city, or they may or may not take care of their properties as well as they should. And some of the other points that were brought up here, people mentioned, capping rental costs. That's a rent control policy kind of thing. Obviously, more jobs that are better paying would certainly help local residents. But some other smaller policies, a clean and lean program, utilizing the American Recovery Plan, really getting the word out on things that are currently available to assist residents. And so that's into the continues our housing discussion. But as we kind of shift over, people talked about the business side of the coin here. So making the neighborhood business friendly, easier to open, particularly restaurants. And I know we've had some restaurant owners that have come to our meetings and talked about the hurdles that they have to jump through. Facilitating the process for things like food trucks as entrepreneurship, startup opportunities for businesses. Somebody mentioned they really would like a microbrewery, providing incentives for startups, considering the impact. So this is where we get to that thought of gentrification and displacement, where somebody said nicer means pricier, which can create places or rent that is cost prohibitive. So it's that balancing act of improving the neighborhood, but not enabling or not facilitating an environment where people get pushed out. And then people have mentioned that we should be able to walk to shops from our homes, and that's kind of how the West Ward is built inherently. But we also know that there's certain things that are missing in the neighborhood, or maybe more difficult for people to access, such as fresh food and grocers. And so that's something that's kind of carried over from a couple of our different work groups. The whole idea of improving curb appeal, I think that goes across the gamut from housing all the way to business. And how do we make sure that this neighborhood remains attractive for people to live and want to invest? More homeowners overall, just the balance of the community of renters versus homeowners. Some people think that it may need to tip a little bit more towards homeowners than what we have here today. Landlords who care. Apartment standards. So that just because you rent, it shouldn't mean that you're not living in a quality apartment. And that's what we really want to create through the Choice program, is high quality rental housing along with new home ownership opportunities. A couple other things before I stop. So people talked about a database for landlords. So you could kind of go in and see almost a ranking system of the current landlords in the city, and new tenants can come in and see what's available and see how the landlords are rated by their tenants. Faith-based services for first-time homeowners, and things like a community street cleanup that really goes to the improving the curb appeal. So there's a lot there, and it covers the whole gamut between residential and business, but just love to hear more kind of discussion on many of these points, or if there's other things that you think aren't here that we really need to be focused on.
Adam,
Yes.
I have a question, and I apologize if you said this earlier and I missed it. Do we, in your assessment, did we find out what, if we're looking at the West Ward, do we find, house by house, basically, where the rental properties are and where the owners are. And then for the rental properties, if the landlords are present, or, you know, landlords that are not so present.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we didn't create an inventory that's that detailed at this point, but I'm not sure. I know John Kingsley from the city is on the line. I'm not sure if the city has any specific inventory related to the landlords and whether they're located within the city or out of town.
Yeah, Adam, we do have an overview of, you know, where our the investment properties are in the city from a residential standpoint. So we do have an idea of who the landlords are. I've not seen the report, but I know that they maintain one in planning and codes, and we can access that information to be able to understand, you know, who is which landlords are operating in what areas of the West Ward, so you can get an idea of where those stronger, you know, support systems lie. And I do think that would be beneficial. I also want to say that within the Redevelopment Authority, it's been talked about for a while. We just have not reinstituted it again. We have begun to develop resources to once again do a landlord training program, which would help to sort of give landlords who are not familiar with or new to the city an understanding of what's expected of them in terms of managing their properties, and also how best to be able to the best practices, you know, associated with managing properties and tenants. I do think that's something we need to revisit, because we obviously want to make sure that the quality of the landlords within the West Ward, actually throughout the city, you know, continue to improve. So a landlord training program, I think, is something we need to reopen discussions on. And actually, Lisa Borick, in our who is an employee of the Redevelopment Authority, has a lot of experience in managing these programs, both locally and in previous positions outside of Pennsylvania. So I do think that's something that we can work on. We can help put together the database if it isn't fully furnished. And then we can also work on assisting with a landlord training program, which I think would be very valuable to those newer landlords, and for that matter, those that might just be looking to see what the city expects.
Yeah.
And John, I think, you know, if we can get a list of who the landlords are and, you know, almost walk the streets to see where those, because you can't really tell unless you're standing in front of a house.
Or you're talking to tenants, yep.
What the condition is. But if we can figure that out, the folks who are doing a good job and being really those present landlords, maybe highlighting them to sort of be those mentors and encourage the community and build off of what exists, would be a nice, you know, positive way to acknowledge them as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love the rating idea. I don't know, is that actively done elsewhere where there are, you know, systems that in place that do that? I'm assuming there are probably, you know, platforms online that would accomplish that task.
Yeah, I think we would need to look a little bit more in that, unless anybody knows of a great example from another community of something like that they'd love to share.
We pull community health needs data for our community health needs assessment based on census tracts. And so we can go back and look at where those tracts fall for housing, looking at income, blight, basically, you know, whether houses have kitchens and things like that, and transportation, all those things. I can go dig a little bit and see what we have as far as that in more detail too.
Yeah, thank you.
For our Easton assessment, the West Ward is definitely covered.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I see Nadia has her hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to speak to that point quickly because my previous landlord was terrific. He wasn't actually present in this state. And unfortunately, sometimes he wasn't if I needed something done in my apartment, he would definitely come out and fix it. But there were things that he didn't know about the city. Like, you cannot leave a television on the sidewalk, so he would get fined. So I think that landlord training program would be good. Also, I was just wondering if landlords are some part of this discussion so that we can maybe hear from their perspective sometimes, because I know it is difficult in terms of like keeping the property clean. It's not only the landlord's responsibility. Sometimes the tenants aren't the greatest tenants. Are we hearing anything from the landlords in regards to that? And then lastly, I know I'm signed up to some emails, and I know HUD just allowed their database of landlord listings to go for a longer period of time. However, where is that listing for people within the community to access? Because if I wasn't seeking that information out, just because I'm nosy and I like to sign up to government emails, if I wasn't, into that, how would people know that say, hey, John McCain down the block has like an apartment for rent, and because they don't have a sign thrown up, or the treasure hunt has gotten smaller, there's no listings in the treasure hunt anymore, you can't really trust Craigslist, where would people be able to find a database of landlords besides a ranking program? But how can, you know what I mean? So that's what I wanted to speak to. Great point. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm kind of curious. I know, Amy, that you're on the Affordable Housing Task Force. Has there been any like landlord roundtables or things like that as part of that discussion?
There hasn't been. I will say, I just looked back at our invite list, and we have at least one, maybe two property. Emilio owns he was invited to this, and he owns several rental properties and is a very good landlord. And then we have a new property developer. So, but I like the suggestion to bring others on board, or try and reach out to some others to be part of this. Yeah, we, through the Affordable Housing Task Force, haven't, I don't believe that was any kind of topic. I'll even ask Jean too. I don't remember that as part of a discussion.
No, I don't recall that either, Amy. What I do recall though was probably, I'm going to say it has to be 9 years now. The city did do a landlord training session. They brought in a consultant. I don't remember his name. And it was a multi-day kind of training session for landlords. If it's helpful, I can go back and research my records and find out who that was, and come back with some additional information.
Yeah, I think that would be great if you're able to dig that up, just to see what the topics were that they hit on and what the participation might have been like.
Sure.
Thanks, Gene. Would anyone like to kind of shift us over into talking a little bit more about business and what we can be doing to help support and grow the business community in the West Ward?
Do we have any business owners in the audience? If you guys want to share.
Well, my mom's an artist. She's owned several businesses, art galleries and studio spaces here. And I work locally here. I do feel like one of the businesses we need definitely is a grocery store. It's for our community. But there's something that I know that they do in New York that maybe I don't know, a small portion of funding. I don't know what kind of program you can find for that, but invest in the low income people to help them start their businesses by having maybe some small business training programs. I know like NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, they have several. I'm on an email list for my grandmother, God rest her soul. I was on an email list for her, and they would send out information for people who want to say, make food and sell it out their home, or babysit, or, you know, maybe learning computers or something, some type of program to maybe help the people within the community to figure out a business that they could start, finding their skill sets and maybe using some of their skill sets to say, hey, you know, maybe I can run a storefront, or maybe I'm a homeowner and inside of my home, I can pick a portion of that to build a business that can help us serve the community, you know, something like that. If we could figure that out, that would be, you know, really good, just to invest back within the people in the community.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that program. You said it's from the New York Housing Authority?
Yeah, I can see if I can find an email with some of the programs that they offer, and I'll forward it over to you, Adam.
Great, thanks.
No problem.
And so one thing we're really hoping to do with the new redevelopment, especially at North Union Street, is to provide potential space along the street on Northampton for new businesses or services that could help support residents. But if we can develop something where the housing authority residents are actually able to either work or run their own business out of a space, I think that could really be a successful outcome here. And so I think we're going to try to explore that through the plan and the design going forward. But I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway. Laura, you mentioned you're a former business owner, and, you know, I'm kind of curious on your perspective as to starting a new business in the community, and what are some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, I am just taking in a lot since I haven't seen this plan before. So it's a lot to take in and sort of process. But I mean, small business owners are always looking for opportunity, you know, and that, you know, what kind of place or like initiative can give you opportunity, sort of a leg up, something that'll sort of put you ahead, because that's how you're trying to make business decisions, right? You're looking for the best type of opportunity. So like attractive rents can be really helpful, or just, you know, some type of initiatives or small funding for startups can really make a big difference in the beginning when starting something. And like I have thought about different projects for the West Ward. So I did start exploring the spaces out there, specifically more spaces that had restaurants in them. And it's been hard to figure out what buildings sort of had, because that's another piece of opportunity, right? If there's already a build out that can be used, then you don't have to like invest so much money. So it is attractive to have spaces that already have a build out, either if it's like a store and it has a counter or a dressing room already, or if it's a restaurant and it has some type of equipment or plumbing and restrooms that you don't have to build out. That's also very attractive for people who want to start up businesses. So like, I think knowing what buildings out there already had something in them would be helpful for people. And then just sort of, you know, getting some people together to understand what the best rents are too, because I think as people who like own the building and maybe see downtown Easton blowing up, I have encountered some like outrageous pricing in the West Ward for spaces. So I think if there's like more information for people who are trying to rent out spaces, that could also be helpful.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Paul, you want to go next? I think you're on mute still, Paul. Paul, I think you're still on mute.
Yes, I'm sorry.
There you go.
I was starting to say, I know that the Affordable Task Force is looking at a model that includes a housing corporation and an affiliate CDFI, Community Development Financial Institute. And that's for housing, but there also are CDFIs specifically that work with small businesses, low-income business owners. Rising Tide in Bethlehem, part of CACLV. And that might be worth having some discussion with. I don't know whether there's a carryover there or not, but it, you know, they focus on development of neighborhoods and I know that Rising Tide is primarily small businesses, startup businesses. Just a thought.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely check that out. Okay, I see.
Can I say something really quickly too? Sorry,
Yeah,
like
sure.
that Rising Tide is a great, is great. That's how I actually started the brewery. Is that was our first loan and how we did get started. But I think if that type of information, getting that out to people, especially in like specific neighborhoods, is really important. And I don't know the best way to get that out. But if people know that's there, I think it could really be taken advantage of.
Great point. Okay, Amy, you want to go next?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on the Rising Tide piece. The Small Business Development Center out of Lehigh University has a fantastic mentorship program, totally free. We've worked with the one gentleman there extensively. He's really great, helping with anything from business plans on up to businesses that would like to grow as well. Excuse me. The other piece too, I think, talking about what Laura has been encountering too, is finding spaces that are built out and ready to rent. I mean, even just knowing what's out there, they're not even close to turnkey. So yeah, having updated kitchens and bathrooms and things like that are one thing, but even the space, the general spaces themselves need a good bit of updating. And I don't know if that's a inventory, like if that's a grant to the property owner or a grant to the business, you know, so they could make the improvements directly. But that could be an interesting asset here.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, you know, I'm also curious as to, you know, how people go about finding available spaces. Is it a lot of word of mouth, or just kind of local seeing a sign in a window, or is there any kind of true kind of formal inventory online or anything for commercial spaces that's being used?
So right now, I know a lot of spaces that are occupied have been occupied for a significant amount of time. So if they close, they're turned over really quickly, and there's not a whole lot of new inventory, although they probably existed 30 some years ago as a storefront in some capacity. And then John can talk about the Zoom prospector that the city uses, but that's something that Tanya and I are starting to embark on, is really walking the neighborhood for a lot of those lost spaces that have kind of just gotten boarded up and left for the time, and then starting to try and make contact with those property owners to see if there's interest in, you know, having a commercial space again.
Great, thank you. Yeah, John, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess on two things. I mean, Amy and I talked about the importance of like a full-scale inventory to understand where you know, the commercial opportunities are in the West Ward, and I think that kind of starts with working with codes and planning to understand what properties are properly zoned for the use, and then looking at, you know, the properties that we recognize are at least in some way situated for business use and start kind of thinking about highest and best uses of those properties makes an awful lot of sense. So we certainly want to be involved in any inventory analysis we're going to do here, because I think it is important. The city, through its Department of Community Economic Development, has created an online, relationship with a company called Zoom Prospector, which is essentially kind of an automatically updated aggregating site that brings properties that are commercial in nature into a commonly accessible area. And it does its best to identify through the various realtors and realty sites to aggregate the properties that are currently available for occupancy or for purchase. It's not an exhaustive site, so we need to enter properties that we become aware of that aren't necessarily on the market via a realtor and maybe being sold by the owner or being marketed for lease by the owner. So we need to manually enter those particular properties. So the more we can do in terms of inventorying, the more we can do, actually walking the streets and actually looking for those opportunities and understanding again the investors that exist in the West Ward and own properties that are properly zoned. The more we can have a full understanding of what's there for business occupancy. And then obviously taking a look at those things and determining where, the types of businesses we'd want to situate do well. And that's kind of doing sort of a market analysis of where, they would be successful. And going back to the technical assistance resources that are out there, there are a number of organizations that engage in business startup related activities. I also put CACLV as one of them that actually does some business training. They have their own business startup program in that organization. And I do believe as it relates to the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations, I do think it is their intention over time to have the community development financial institution that might come out of those recommendations actually focus on small business financing as well. So those resources, and there are several different, outlets for accessing them. We have to do a better job, apparently, of broadcasting, where, these are congregated, because there are a number of sites within the Lehigh Valley, the Small Business Development Center being one of them, where they tend to help broadcast the various resources that are out there to help from a small business financing standpoint. And all of these organizations are pretty aware of each other. So they know who does what. But at the end of the day, it sounds like we need to do a better job of making people aware of where the centerpieces in those resources. And the Small Business Development Center is an excellent place to start, as would CACLV would be a great place to start, to be able to identify where those resources, what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's technical or whether it's small business financing resources, are located.
Great, thank you, John.
I want to add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that's okay.
Sure.
So in one of my previous jobs, I actually worked at a small business development center in Philly. So I actually have contact information for the folks that run the SBDC in the Lehigh Valley at Kutztown. While I was working at the Small Business Development Center, we ran programs that were landlord training, but how to teaching them how to run like a rental business. So because being a landlord is not just like taking care of the property, like sometimes people just jump into a real estate opportunity without actually like looking at the finances and all that. So maybe this is also a potential partnership opportunity with the SBDC to teach landlords also like how to not be extractive as economic resources and just like upping the rent just because they can, but no, like helping them in, I don't know, in the turnaround of for the neighborhood, if that makes sense. And then I also wanted to point out another opportunity, but I already forgot about it, so I'll write it on the chat when it comes back.
Thank you, Andrea. Michael, you've had your hand up for a little while. You want to go next?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I wanted to hit on just a few things. Some of this is going back a little bit to conversation we just had. But one specifically was well, there's two that are kind of tied together that were done by the same developer, one in Kansas City and one in Omaha. In Kansas City, there's a building called the Pendleton Arts Block, which was part of the Choice Neighborhoods project there. That building, the entire ground floor, at least the majority of the ground floor, was either community space, and then there was a large amount of it reserved for artist studios. And they have an artist in residency program where once a year artists, and artists is a loose term, there's lots of arts and culture, and there are some small businesses that are in there, but basically you get for a year, you can rent out one of the spaces. It's highly subsidized through the developer. It's become very competitive now because it's been open for about 2 years, and they turn over the spaces. And so that's a potential idea to create. It doesn't necessarily need to be artists. It could also be small business focused, but that kind of creates its own community. And then another project by the same developer in Omaha, there's a building called the Accelerator. And within that building, there's a lot of things that happen within the building. But in relation to what we were talking about with small businesses, they have what's called the dining room in there. And it's what it sounds like, it's a dining room, but it basically houses 3 local restaurants. Originally, the idea was for them to be rotating. They share a kitchen, and basically COVID kind of screwed it up, as it did with most things, but it was supposed to be a similar idea where it would help a small starting restaurant have a space. They don't have to pay for the kitchen. They can come in and use it. And once they kind of generate their own enough revenue, they can move out to either a bigger location that's within somewhere else in the Accelerator or kind of elsewhere in the community. So an idea of a way to kind of incubate spaces. And then tied to what we were talking about with kind of startup businesses, there's a program in Philadelphia called Jumpstart Germantown, which is actually spread now to other cities. Ken Weinstein, some of you may have heard his name, but he has a lot of materials that are available that are out that can be shared. And he's always more than happy to come and talk with other communities. And it sounds very similar. I was Googling the Rising Tide program, community fund. It's very similar to that, where it's small micro loans and also training for new businesses on how to apply for business loans and kind of understanding everything that comes with kind of owning and starting a new small business. I think, yeah, those are all my things. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. We'll definitely look into that. I may actually be in Kansas City in a month or so maybe I will stop by the art block and check it out.
Yeah, we can connect you with people out there.
Great. Nadia, I think I saw you had your hand up before. I'm not sure if you wanted to jump in again.
I was just having, I was just wondering what happened to the CACLV site we had here in Easton, but Amy answered that question for me.
Okay, thank you.
The thing that I wanted to say earlier, and then I forgot, I remember now. Thanks for your patience. So there's this program here in Philly. It's called Storefront Improvement Program, and it's a grant for local small businesses if they are located in a business corridor that has high incidence of blight. The city has this grant, and first we connect the business owners to technical assistance resources like an SBDC so that they can improve their business plan. And then once they get their business plan together, they are eligible to get this grant funding that would help them improve the storefront. And it's a grant, it's money that doesn't have to be paid back. And one of the greatest challenges is that businesses actually don't know how to put their business plans together sometimes. So connecting them to technical assistance and then having an incentive like a grant at the end is a program that could be effective. And if Easton had something similar, perhaps it would be successful.
Great, thank you. Paul, I think you can go
next.
next.
I just wanted to go back to the landlord situation for a minute. This has just been, my question is, a new somebody that buys a property and they want to become a landlord with housing assistance from like the housing authority and so on, is there a process that they go through, or their standards? Not just everybody can all of a sudden be a landlord that's going to qualify for
you're talking about
supplementing their tenants.
A Section 8 voucher?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gene or Craig, do you want to speak to that at all?
I don't know that there's any kind of training for that. I think it's live and learn by trial and error. You know, if you're new to the Section 8 program, you may not be familiar with certain procedures that, you know, need to take place. So, you know, we try to guide new landlords along, and we're always looking to attract landlords with decent properties. So, you know, whatever we can do to assist them on that learning curve, we do. But there isn't any specific program that provides training.
But do they have to qualify in some way to receive the supplement?
Well, they have to be up. They have to be up to date on their property taxes. You know, we require an affidavit that their taxes are paid up. They have to pass. The unit has to pass a housing inspection.
Okay.
You know, rents have to be within a certain range within our payment standard in order to participate. And it's I always look at it as like a triangle. We have an agreement with the tenant, and tenant has a voucher, and if they provide all the information that, you know, we require, we'll provide them assistance. The tenant then has a relationship with the landlord, and that's through the form of a lease. And then the landlord has a relationship with the housing authority through a housing assistance payments contract. And the contract requires, you know, the landlord provide upkeep and keep it in decent, safe condition, and promises not to, you know, have side agreements or gouge the tenant in some other way.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Andre.
So maybe this would be a thing that part of an informational piece that we include in this prospective tenant training or in this prospective tenant program, because I feel that there's a lot of landlords that perhaps they don't know how the Section 8 program works. And like if we included this free bit of information, then they would be more likely to accept Section 8 once that they understand that, like, anyways, your property still needs to be safe and you still need to have a rental license, right? So they are not incurring any additional responsibilities or additional, I don't know, costs or administration things. And then one thing that has come to my attention from reading the news was that at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was like all the economic instability, the folks that were receiving Section 8 assistance were the ones who actually like remained more stable in their housing, and they didn't miss as many payments, or their economy wasn't as disrupted as everyone else who perhaps was affected by unemployment. So maybe we could include information like this on the training.
Great idea. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to kind of share their thoughts. So if anyone else would like to jump in.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just finding all of this information mind-blowing. Just listening to everything. And it just don't sound like something that we can't do. Sounds so doable. Everything it makes sense. We need restaurant owners, people that own like little stores around here, boutiques and all of that. Everything that's going on downtown, we can't get one. I mean, that was my thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your optimism. I think we can all really use that as energy to move forward on some of these projects. So thank you for sharing that. Craig.
Adam?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I just want to...
Sorry, let's go to Craig first. I'm not sure who's...
Sure. Okay, one thing that we need to keep in mind, especially with regard to Section 8, is that when the economy is good, the property owners can charge market rent and get the market rent. And usually when the economy goes bad, that's when a lot of the landlords have a tendency to, not be able to fulfill their properties, and that's when they experiment with Section 8. So I think that's a lot to do with what's available out there now. So I think we need to keep that in mind when you're developing affordable properties.
So you're saying a lot of it's based on timing and where we are in the economic cycle.
I think that is a component.
Yeah.
It ebbs and flows.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. I think, was it David that wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. Certainly one problem issue that we'll have to address for residents and commercial in the West Ward is going to be parking, because it just isn't a whole lot of it there. And I think eventually the city will probably have to address this by ordinance, and especially in residences, people moving in, maybe limited to 2 vehicles. I'm not even sure we can do that, but try somehow to limit the number of vehicles that will be coming in. It's a problem that we're experiencing in the downtown area too. And it's certainly a problem in the West Ward, and it's something going to affect everything. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
David,
sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Sorry, Adam, I didn't mean to interrupt, but David, we actually are forming a parking committee, and actually to everyone on this committee, to the extent you didn't know, the West Ward Community Initiative is forming a parking subcommittee. So David, we would love your participation if you were interested. But you can.
Oh, sure.
You or anyone else who might have any interest can contact me separately. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Can I just ask, what's the impetus of that committee?
I'm sorry, who was that was speaking?
That was Julie Zando Dennis.
Okay.
Yeah, Julie Zando Dennis. Hey.
Can you
what
tell
was
us
the impetus?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Is it more about the just tell me about what led to the idea of creating that committee, and if you guys have brainstormed any solutions at this point.
Well, the impetus, you know, as a West Ward resident, you know, I'm acutely aware of how difficult it is to find parking on my own street. The impetus partly started with a belligerent neighbor who, in a one family home, has five cars, and they started essentially hoarding the parking spaces by parking in a space and a half. And then they would move their cars appropriately whenever like one of their housemates came home, so that essentially they were able to sort of block out about a half a block of parking for their own use. And that ended up being, then my tenant who lives adjacent to my house got kind of very furious about this. And then I've got an innumerable text messages from her about this issue. So I thought, well, okay, I probably should take some kind of action. So I reached out to Amy, and with her support, you know, we were able to get a committee formed through the West Ward Community Initiative. The other impetus is that I had to call the police on another neighbor who was very upset that I was parking in his quotation marks parking space in front of his rental home. And he got very aggressive. I had to call the police. And what was interesting was the police officer said that it's like a pet peeve of his that a lot of parking wars break out in the West Ward, and it ends up affecting safety and security in the West Ward. So it, and I know, I definitely feel it personally, you know, with what happened with my neighbor who was essentially threatened to burn my homes down because I parked in, quote, his space. So, you know, parking really does touch on a lot of facets of West Ward life. So that's why, you know, and I'm kind of heading it up and planning on getting everyone who's interested together, and we'll talk with Dave Hopkins. I already spoke with Dave Hopkins earlier. We had a lengthy conversation, and he gave me he talked about some of the options, and none of them are really perfect. So it's going to be it's going to be hard to do anything that has any impact, but we're going to explore those options.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting to hear the background on that. Being here in Chicago, we have something called dibs, where on snowy days like this, people shovel out their parking spaces and put chairs out on the street, and they expect them to still be there when they come home from work. Yeah. So
the problem here, though, is that now neighbors are putting chairs out when there's no snow on the street.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, I could go on and on. But anyway, yeah, David, if you'd like to join us or anyone else, please let me know.
Thanks for that. I see Nadia, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, I just had a quick thing to say, and not in regards to parking, but in regards to when we're creating these resource lists and so forth. I think it would be like really good to have them in places like the neighborhood center where people drop their kids off, pick them up, you know, just so that like 3rd Street Alliance, well, that's downtown, but like the neighborhood center, it's a hub. Anywhere that kids and parents and families to come together, we need to have those landlord lists. We need to have those business resource grants lists. You know, if we can get, you know, I don't know how comfortable people are giving out email addresses, but like I know, Amy, when you have events, you know, you have a list and people can sign up. And then, you know, even through an email list, if they're not going to come to those sites, just have some information and be able to give them out, especially I think it's someplace like that where, you know, your kids are coming up, they're giving them dinner at night. When you come to pick up your kid, you might need to know where the new apartments are coming up, or if you wanted to start your own business. So I think like something like that would be good in places like that. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. Great idea. Thank you. That's all about communication. So appreciate that comment. All right. Well, we are about 2 minutes to the end of the meeting, and you all did an amazing job. We kind of blanketed our mind map here with different ideas and strategies. So where we're going to go from here is take these, and then at our second meeting, which, excuse me, will be February, looking at it right now, February 23rd, same time, 3:30. And I'll send out the invites to everybody, but we want to be able to take some of these strategies in a list and start to prioritize them. So we're going to give everybody the opportunity to kind of rank the strategies and projects in terms of what they think are the most important. And so that'll help us really see what's rising to the top. And those top strategies are going to be the ones that really become priority projects of the plan. So that's our second step. And then the third step will be in March, when we focus in on those priority strategies. Like it could be this landlord inventory list, and start to develop a sense of the partners that could help out with it, as well as resources that could be available to make it happen. So we hope you all can kind of stay with us here. We have some other people that'll probably be joining the group too. And if you think there's other people that you'd like to invite, definitely reach out to them and invite them to come to the discussion. And if you happen to be interested in any of the other working groups, so I think tomorrow we have transportation open space, and we have art, history, and culture. You're welcome to sign up for more than one group, because you know we really like to get as many people involved as possible, and you can see what we've done so far on some of the other groups. But with that, just want to kind of bring the meeting to a close, and thank you all for being here. Michael, you have your hand up. Do you have any last thoughts?
Just something real quick I'll add for, and talks about the parking. It might be helpful to reach out to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. They're the MPO for the area, and they've done, I just looked quickly, they've done other parking studies for other towns. You might be able to get a grant to find, to get someone to assist in doing a parking study. And I think looking at, there's one I see that was done for the borough of Bath, which is like out past Nazareth. And you can kind of see the outcomes that were done in there, which I think is exactly what the West Ward would be looking for. And you just need to normally look for the grant application cycle of when to apply for that.
Great suggestion.
Great, thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you in February, and we will be sharing out all of this information to the group in the meantime. But have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you all soon.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.